of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
8:59 here at News 88.7. Good morning. Few wrecks. NUA Gulf Freeway headed south before Scott Street. Before you get to our studios, a couple of right lanes blocked off with an accident. One up on the North Loop eastbound Lockwood with a pedestrian, and 10 on the inbound lanes, the Bay County Freeway around Jensen as you approach 69. Watch for another one. Another heat advisory today, high near 100. Tonight's low around 80. And then tomorrow and the next couple of days near 100, and chance of rain coming in on Thursday. Right now we're sitting at 83, Bush Airport, 84 here at the University of Houston. Get HPM anytime on HPM Plus, free to download for smart TVs. It's KUHF Houston News 88.7. The service of the University of Houston, 9 o'clock.
The Houston Astros and general manager Dana Brown have mutually agreed to part ways. I'm Craig Cohen. Today on Houston Matters, we'll discuss with Believe in Astros co-host Jeff Balke. We'll also talk about the Astros fight now for the division lead, and we'll talk about the Texans preparing for cut day in a week.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, why we may be seeing more unwanted junk communication than ever right now, and what, if anything, you can do about it. Also, more than 20 Houston area apartment landlords are accused of using a shared pricing algorithm to push rents higher. We'll discuss what a settlement means for affected renters. Then we dig into school accountability grades in an education roundtable. We'll start with the news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. On Wall Street, stocks opened mixed this morning as a trade rift widens between the U.S. and Canada. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow rose around 160 points and the Nasdaq fell about 215 points in early trading.
Both the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Roundtable are urging the U.S. and Canada to get back to the bargaining table in hopes of de-escalating this latest trade dust-up. President Trump imposed 50% tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Canadian imports over the weekend after talks collapsed late Friday. Canada has threatened to retaliate with tariffs of its own in about 2 weeks, which could offer a window for renewed negotiation. Investors will get an update on inflation and consumer spending later this week. The Commerce Department's price gauge, which is closely watched by the Federal Reserve, is expected to show that annual inflation cooled slightly last month, though prices are still climbing faster than the central bank would like. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Iran says it will punish regional countries if they cooperate with President Trump's new economic sanctions that are set to be announced by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent today. This as Iran's economy is already in free fall from existing U.S. sanctions. Trump says the U.S. will punish countries that help Iran avoid sanctions. NPR's Adil Al-Shalchi reports Iran's new security chief says on state TV that Iran would retaliate in, quote, a seismic manner to Trump's plans.
The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baqai called the expected sanctions a form of economic terrorism to punish Iran. Iranian security chief Mohsen Rezai said that any country partnering in these new economic restrictions would be considered an enemy and that Iran will target their interests. Since the beginning of the war, Iran has targeted U.S. installations in Jordan and Gulf countries with drones and missiles. Rezai said that Iran would attack oil tankers leaving through the Persian Gulf through alternative routes. He added that, quote, not even a single drop of oil will leave the region. Adil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Istanbul.
NPR has gotten rare insight into how some members of the National Guard are feeling about President Trump's ongoing deployment to Washington, D.C., where thousands of armed, uniformed troops have been patrolling for more than a year. NPR's Kat Lonsdorf has more.
3 Guard members who each spent many months on the D.C. mission spoke to NPR candidly on the condition of anonymity, as they're not authorized to speak publicly. They had concerns about the cost, stretching into the billions, worries about the constant patrols normalizing the presence of armed military, and the damage they feel Trump's deployments are causing to the reputation of the National Guard.
I will say very frankly that the bad taste that this mission left in my mouth, it actually embarrasses me to be involved in any way.
Another said, quote, it feels like the Guard is being exploited. The White House responded by reiterating how safe D.C. is now without providing evidence the Guard has decreased crime. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR be the model for high-quality journalism in the 21st century. This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. Breaking news in Houston sports this morning. The general manager of the Astros, Dana Brown, will no longer be leading the team. In a press release this morning, the Astros say that they have mutually agreed to part ways with Brown before his contract was set to expire at the end of this season. Brown's responsibilities will go to the team's assistant general managers and senior advisor, former first baseman Jeff Bagwell. Houston is tied for first place right now in the American League West Division and are deep in the middle of a playoff run. They are coming off two bad losses to the Athletics, the last place team in the division, though. We'll get more on the move coming up this hour on Houston Matters. High school football gets underway this week as fans flood stadiums all across Texas. Our Rob Salinas says game officials are stressing a good sportsmanship program that has reduced the number of ejections from players and fans.
For the past 39 years, Rod McClain has patrolled the sidelines at high school football games in North Texas. He says the talent during Friday nights is unmatched.
High school football in Texas is better than any other place, without a doubt.
Passion for the game can run hot both on the field and in the stands. To help combat unruly behavior, coaches and referees implemented a statewide good sportsmanship initiative called the Texas Way. McClain says it's made a difference.
Of the ejections that happened, and we're talking players, coaches, fans, over 90% of the ejections that came during high school football games through the UIL came from schools that did not participate in the Texas Way.
McClain is one of the executives with the Texas Association of Sports Officials. He says turnover of referees is fairly constant, but his organization is always ready to train people willing to step onto the field. I'm Rob Salinas, News 88.7.
And the mayor of the city of Lamarck has been released on $75,000 bond after getting arrested last Friday. Keith Bell was placed into custody in Brazoria County on charges of indecent exposure. He has not publicly responded to those charges yet. Another heat advisory in place until 7 o'clock tonight. I'm Matt Harab, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on News 88.7 and Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, the Houston Astros and their general manager, Dana Brown, have agreed to part ways. We will discuss later in the hour with Believe in Astros co-host Jeff Balke. Also contending with all that unwanted junk communication. And we dig into school accountability grades in an education roundtable. First, though, more than 20 Houston area apartment landlords stand accused of using a shared pricing algorithm to push rents higher. And now a $360 million settlement means some affected renters in Houston can start filing claims. Marissa Luck is senior real estate reporter at the Houston Chronicle. Marissa, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. The algorithm is part of software called RealPage. This is a Texas-based technology company offering it. It's property management software and data analytics for real estate owners and operators. What's wrong with that?
I think there's nothing wrong inherently with having a software like RealPage to manage revenue. What was the issue was the accusation was that these landlords and property managers were using this allegedly as a way to collude on rent prices through this third party. So I think the price coordination and the collusion, that's the part that the Department of Justice and all these plaintiffs want to stop.
Yeah, so the lawsuit alleges landlords accepted RealPage's suggested rents about 90% of the time. Why does that number matter to this collusion claim?
So essentially, maybe I can just start with talking about how the software actually worked.
By all means.
So RealPage is, if you're in the industry, you've definitely heard of RealPage. It is widely used by a lot of apartment companies. And what it does is it has a number of different services, but it offers property managers and landlords to quickly assess what's going on in the market and try to determine what's the appropriate price to rent for an apartment, because every month, every week, really, it can be a different price depending on what's going on. So it's designed to help landlords actually fill vacant apartments and not have a lot of empty apartments. As part of the software, all of RealPage's clients would send, who were part of this particular part of RealPage. They would send a bunch of leasing information to RealPage itself. So things like transaction data, how long the leases were, what the rent prices were. And then RealPage said it would then anonymize that data, make it anonymous. But the problem was that it would take it all together, put it in a fancy algorithm, and then spit out these rent price recommendations to landlords. So basically saying, we have all this information from all your competitors. We're mixing it up, and this is what your competitors are doing, and what the market is saying, and what your properties are doing, and this is the price that we think you should do. Now, the problem is that most people ended up allegedly accepting that rent price. So this is essentially like if a bunch of companies, they weren't necessarily like literally getting into a back room and talking about pricing, but they were saying, hey, this is, here's a bunch of our information. And then, Bob over here is going to collect all that information. He's going to do a bunch of algorithm numbers and then come up with a suggested rent price and then spit it back out to everyone, and almost everyone's accepting it. That's sort of the allegations that were involved.
How many Houston area apartment units are we talking about here being affected by
So
this?
the last time I did a analysis on this was in 2023 using 2022 data, because this case has been ongoing a long time. It was about 136,000 units. And you have to remember that apartment unit does not equal one person, right? You can have people are married, roommates, you have people moving in and out, and this period of the lawsuit was over 5 years. So imagine one apartment complex. If you have, most people, the leases are 1 year, maybe they'll say 2 years. Literally, it could be tens of thousands of renters that are affected just in Houston, and millions nationally.
How much have renters allegedly been overcharged?
So this was a complicated thing to try to answer. What they ended up doing in this particular private lawsuit is they hired an consulting firm to do what's called like a regression analysis. And they determined that in Houston, it was Houston, Austin, and San Antonio where the renters were allegedly overcharged about 4%. And then in Dallas, it was about 7%. So that doesn't necessarily mean that, you're going to get all that money back, but that could amount to, hundreds of dollars over the course of a year.
There are some pretty big name multifamily property firms that have signed on to this settlement. Houston's own Camden Property Trust among them.
Right.
Some other major property owners, Greystar, Mid-America Apartment Communities also listed. So we're not talking about an insignificant number of units, obviously. Mm-hmm. Have Camden or any of these other companies made any statements about these settlements?
Yeah. And well, first of all, it's important to note that none of these landlords or property managers are accepting liability. The settlement, it's pretty standard language. They aren't saying that they actually did anything illegal. And Camden in particular told me, we didn't use the software in an illegal way. We settled purely, to avoid the risk and the cost of this drawn out litigation process, which has already reached in 3 years. Yeah. And, that they're more focused. They're trying to just focus on residents now. So there was basically different variations of those claims across different landlords. Some of the landlords settled pretty early, like Greystar settled earlier than others. So it's complicated because there's over 50 different defendants in this case. So there's different settlements coming in at different times.
With so many defendants, I imagine some Houston renters are wondering, I wonder if I even qualify for this. How do you find out?
Right. So you can go, I do put a link to that in my story. The website is realpagesettlement.com, and you can go in and you can enter in your address or the name of your apartment complex to see if you might be eligible. And it's important to note that just because, maybe one of your landlord or property manager hasn't settled, that doesn't mean that you can't make a claim.
Are there any deadlines to do this?
Yes. Good question. Okay, so the first deadline would be September 1st, and that's if you want to opt out of the case. Opting out meaning perhaps you want to sue these folks for RealPage-related stuff later on, or you can file a claim, and you have to do that by January 29, 2027.
While some of these property owners, again, saying they're not, accepting or claiming that they are in any way liable, but they're settling. RealPage itself, the software company itself, is not. They're still fighting the case, and they dispute that their software drives rents up. What is their argument?
So RealPage, so it's important to note there's two big cases going on. There's this private class action lawsuit that was filed in the federal Tennessee court. That's what my recent story was about. There's also been an ongoing Department of Justice lawsuit, and that one RealPage actually has settled. But going back to RealPage's arguments, they say, look, like algorithms itself, that doesn't drive rent price increases. We're in an age where there's literally algorithms everywhere. There's AI everywhere. They're saying what causes the rent price increases is a fundamental supply and demand issue. And in places like San Francisco, where there hasn't been a lot of housing developed recently, rent prices have gone up. And then if you look at a lot of markets in Texas, where there has been new supply, rents have actually gone down. So they're saying, hey, we're not disputing that there may have been rent increases, but don't pin it on us.
Is RealPage still being used by a lot of multi-family property companies?
It is being used. There are some property managers that told me that they have since ceased using RealPage altogether. One of them, Cortland, is actually investing in developing its own proprietary software. They didn't really provide any specifics on what that exactly means, but it's not. The settlements aren't saying you can't use RealPage. It's just saying, you're not going to share this, private data. You're not going to share leasing data with RealPage. You're going to use it in a different way, basically.
Marissa Luck is a senior real estate reporter with the Houston Chronicle. Marissa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next, unsolicited calls, junk mail, unwanted emails and texts. We are inundated by it all. Do we have to be? Whether and how to free ourselves from the spam we don't want and didn't ask for. This Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Like you, and from Baylor College of Medicine. With over 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TVA, Grammy-winning mariachi singer Vicente Fernandez performs a historic farewell concert in Mexico City. Enjoy Un Azteca and El Azteca tonight at 7 on TV8.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. We may have reached a perfect storm for junk communication. We are a little over 2 months away from a midterm general election and have been through many months of primaries across the country. And with more money than ever being spent on those elections, we're all getting more solicitations than ever for more campaigns than ever, especially here in Texas, where the U.S. Senate campaign this year has been the most expensive one ever. But it's not just the political world. Every transaction we do, every service we receive, every interaction online seems to lead to further solicitations, suggested purchases, online surveys, reviews, and ratings. It's also back to school season, so we've been inundated with related sales and products. And in the worst sustained heat of the summer, we are inside in air conditioning a lot more, which leads many of us back to our phones, where the unsolicited calls, the junk mail, the unwanted emails and texts simply continue. But does it have to? Let's discuss if and how we can free ourselves from the spam we don't want and didn't ask for with the help of longtime technology writer Dwight Silverman. Dwight, good morning.
Good morning, Craig.
And I'd love to say you've got the inside track for how to avoid this stuff, but as you told me off-air before walking into the studio, while you were waiting outside the studio, what happened?
Oh, so I'm standing out there in it's not a green room, it's a green lobby, I guess.
Right.
And I got a spam/scam text. Goldie from Amazon's recruiting department says they have reviewed my profile and think that I would be an excellent match for a part-time remote role. This comes from a phone number that is not in the U.S. And if I'm interested in earning between $250 and $500 a day, there's a U.S. number that I can text for more information. Amazon does not want to hire me, and I don't want to work for Amazon.
Are you telling me that Goldie isn't being completely honest with you?
Goldie is a fiction. And so fortunately, we can start with this to talk about some of the things that you can do.
Yeah, by all means.
So the nice thing about modern smartphones and their operating systems is that they have a lot of tools in there to deal with this kind of thing. So I have an iPhone, and at the bottom of this, there's a very handy button that says Report Spam, which is what this is. I tap that. It says Delete and Report Spam. It gets it out of my junk mail, and it sends it to Apple as well as T-Mobile, and it will report that this number is spam. The problem is that people who send this kind of thing are, like I said, not honest. And so they're coming from phone numbers that aren't real. I can block that phone number, but I'll probably get something else from another phone number. It is a incredibly moving target and getting more so. But there are things you can do.
All right. So what is the best way to minimize the number of these things we receive?
Well, the best thing you can do is to be very aware whenever you do any kind of transaction, be it online or offline, that you pay attention to what you are agreeing to. When you buy something at a store, for example, and you're at the point of sale register, and they ask you for your email. If you give them your email, you will start getting email from that store. You may even start getting regular postal mail because they can link your email address to your physical address.
But here's the key. It's not just that you start to get that from that store. That store may turn around and sell that to others, and suddenly you're getting all kinds of stuff.
Yes. So I generally decline that. Online, sometimes you have to put in an email address in order to complete a transaction or view something. A lot of publications want at least an email before they'll show you a story or something. It doesn't necessarily have to be a real email address.
That's
For
true.
example, Fred at Flintstone.com does a lot of heavy lifting for me. And so you can always do that.
Yeah.
But the important thing to do is anytime you do any kind of a transaction anywhere, look online on the page. There's usually a checkbox that's pre-checked that says, I agree to receive communications from this business and its partners. Uncheck that. Look for those. They're small, they're tiny, they're often on point of sale terminals. And in terms of like email and spam, that is probably the best way you can go about defeating that.
Let's come back to the whole Fred at Flintstone.com thing, because there's been a change, it seems to me, in the last year or so. More and more places are then sending a code, a link, something to the email address that you enter in that you need to then go into and click on or type in that code to confirm in order to get access to whatever it is you're looking for. That means you can't really just use a fake email account.
In that instance, no. But that, in my experience, that remains particularly for individual publications and kind of random things you run across. That is not necessarily always required. And if that's what happens, then you just don't get access to that. And that may end up being a good thing if that's their attitude towards it.
Years ago, back in the landline days, there were federal and some state do not call services established as a means to cut down on unwanted phone calls. Do those still work today for the kinds of phones we have now?
Yes, they do. There are actual laws for physical mail, for spam, and for text messages, and they're fairly convoluted. They all have carve-outs for certain things, and you've been talking about politics. One of the carve-outs in almost all of them, is political messaging. But there are specific instances, for example, if a political campaign cannot send out a blast, just a random blast to a bunch of people that have not agreed to get it. But if you have ever donated to a campaign, that's considered a transaction with that campaign, and they can then send you something, although there may be a checkbox when you go through that process.
I guess I've got to look up and see if something that any do not call efforts I've made in the past have expired or something, because I don't know about you, but I still get those kinds of solicitations, and I don't.
You'll notice,
I don't give money to any campaigns, and haven't for years and years and years.
So you will notice that when you get those, they usually are kind of like Goldie from Amazon.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Betty from the so-and-so campaign. That's sent by an individual. They can do it unsolicited by an individual. Now, the question is, in the age of AI, is it actually an individual?
I'm almost certain it's not, and I just go ahead and block all of those.
And you can block them, but you may get another one from a different thing.
Absolutely. Sometimes they come in and they think I'm somebody else, and it's from some campaign in Alaska or someplace.
Right.
I'm like, why am I getting this?
Yes. Yeah. Well, there may be many C. Cohens out there, Craig, and that could be part of it. I get texts and emails for Dan Silverman, David Silverman, Doug Silverman, Dinah Silverman,
but sometimes the name, like they think I'm a completely different name. That's probably
Phyllis
or whatever. I don't know. It's just some other name entirely.
Yes, and again, that's probably a workaround you can send it individually.
Many of us use apps that alert us to probable spam in addition to whatever is already built into the phone. Do you have any favorite or preferred apps that do this?
I think the best way to approach this is actually through your carrier. All of the primary carriers, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and perhaps some of the smaller MVNO subcarriers, all have built within their system spam filtering, and it works for texts and calls. Usually it's kind of very basic, but it will keep most of them out. If you pay a little more, they have like a premium version that works better. For example, T-Mobile, I have it turned on for T-Mobile, the free version. I very seldom get any spam calls. And if I do, it will often come up with the phrase spam likely. And so I just don't answer it. And what I do is I will go in and I see that number, and then I'll just block the number.
All right. So let's say you get one of those calls and it suggests probable spam, likely spam. Can some calls we receive be flagged as such and they're not actually?
I have not seen that, but usually, so there's a thing called it's called Shaken and Stirred, and it was a technology introduced several years ago that checks to see if the number's real. And if the number's real, it usually won't have that on it. And if you look in, for example, on the iPhone, if you look in the recents list of calls, you'll see, let's see, I believe it's a checkbox that shows that it is, Hold on. Okay.
Everybody sit tight while Dwight searches on his phone.
Yes. So it's basically like it indicates that it is a real number. And what's interesting is I so seldom get things that aren't, that almost all of my recents are people in my contact list. So T-Mobile does a pretty good job of it.
So in essence, if you get something and it indicates that it's probably spam, do you have enough confidence there to not only not answer it, but just immediately delete it and block it?
If it's important, they'll leave if it's somebody who really needs to reach you, they'll leave a voicemail, or then they'll turn around and text. But your best bet against spam is if you don't recognize the number, weren't expecting the call, don't answer it.
My email accounts, I've one through work, one privately, they have spam filters that catch a lot, automatically delete messages after a period of time. Is it worth it to go through them, though, individually, one by one, and unsubscribe? When they have at the bottom of whatever it is, there might be a little link that says, to click to unsubscribe them where you can. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
It really depends. If you're a pretty savvy internet user and you understand email, and you can tell that the email is coming actually from an actual business or somebody you've done business with, and it's just been sent over there, that's probably safe to unsubscribe. If it's kind of a lot of spam email may say it's from Microsoft, but then the actual email that it comes from is johnx4321@gmail.com.
Right.
Don't do that one.
Because some of those, the little link that says unsubscribe, that's actually a link.
Confirmation, right?
That
the email is real.
Right. Or that may cause them to gain access to something on your system.
So I recently retired from doing full-time tech coverage or my column. And I have been going into my spam folder and looking for press releases from companies that would send me constant press releases, and some of them have that unsubscribe thing. But some things look like press releases and are not press releases, and so I stay away from those.
Anything else we can do to cut down on the proliferation of junk communication we receive?
There are ways to cut down on the mail in your actual physical mail. There are some websites, and you can find them on the FTC's website.
It's the Federal Trade Commission.
Right, Federal Trade Commission, and just look up reduce junk mail in my inbox, and there are several sites you can go to separately for like credit. You've been pre-approved for this credit, that kind of thing is a separate thing, and then they're also for kind of more general things like catalogs. You may have to pay a small fee, like I think $6, but if you want to cut down on what comes into your physical mail, that will work.
This is all ubiquitous, of course. Everybody deals with this.
Right.
But I do wonder if living in a major metro area like Greater Houston, do we unwittingly end up with even more of this communication than we might otherwise? More people, more potential business, more transactions, more reason one way or another to end up with spam.
I think on the physical end, the physical transactions you do, which I mentioned at the beginning, more and more businesses in Houston are more tech savvy, and that also means they're more tech marketing savvy. So you are more apt to run into, like even in a small business, a point of sale terminal that wants to send you email and junk mail. And so keep an eye on what it says on there and uncheck that box if that's an option.
Dwight Silverman is a now retired longtime consumer tech columnist with the Houston Chronicle, but apparently has a great job opportunity with Amazon. Dwight, thanks for talking with us.
All right, thanks. I got to go click on this.
Where did they get my name? It's always just the same. Junk mail, junk mail. I think I'll change address. I'm not a resident. I'm not an occupant.
I'm Stephen Dubner.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider committed to helping Texas communities and emphasizing safety. More at texasmutual.com/TexansGetIt.
Join us for Hello Houston, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., taking a deep dive into the stories that matter to Houstonians, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained, with the generous support from our founding sponsor, Kathy Sanders.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. A new school year has begun. There's a lot going on in the world of education across Greater Houston, including reporting by the Houston Chronicle last week that finds last year's school accountability grades for many Houston ISD schools may have been inflated. HISD schools and schools in other districts in the metro area, for that matter, and across the state have aggressively used remedial online college prep courses, which took some students just hours to finish and may have had limited value except to boost those school accountability grades. Let's discuss now with Houston Public Media's education reporter Bianca Seward, Claire Partain, education reporter for the Houston Chronicle, and Megan Menchaca, now K-12 education reporter for the Texas Tribune, who wrote about HISD school rating inflation with Claire and Caroline Gasolfi. Good morning to you all.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, Megan, let me start with you because I think you kind of got this rolling in your final days at the Chronicle by looking into these college prep courses. What did you want to know?
Sure. So last year we noticed when the 2025 A through F accountability ratings came out, there were several HISD schools that had reported a large number, very high number of students taking these courses. And so we wanted to look at how those courses, which the TEA has found are not leading to outcomes after graduation, how those courses had impacted the ratings. These courses are one of many ways students can earn college prep credit, AP courses, IB courses, scoring well in the SAT, ACT. We found that many students at a lot of these campuses were only getting those college prep courses, as college readiness credit and not getting any of these other metrics. We wanted to see what that actually was looking like for the ratings, particularly because the TEA is going to be removing many of these courses from counting in future ratings.
Yeah, Claire, so this has kind of become a way, I mean, maybe it's an unfair characterization, but in essence to kind of game the system a little bit here, to say, let's just have as many of our students take these classes as possible, regardless of whether they're helpful or not to the individual student. They can be helpful because there was, I guess, this language that said, if you have enough people taking this, will boost your accountability, your school's accountability grade, like a letter grade, right?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that really stood out to us was just how much this had grown over the last several years. So these existed before the pandemic started, but after the pandemic and when the TEA started endorsing this as part of accountability credit, in Houston ISD, we saw the course enrollment grow, I think 14 or 20-fold.
14-fold.
14-fold. And so that was something that stood out to us immediately is, okay, there are more students enrolling in these classes than just kids who are really behind, which is who it was originally designed for. There has to be something else to this. And so, yeah, we did an analysis. Caroline did the data analysis and really understood the Texas accountability system. And we found that at half of HISD schools, their letter grade would have been at least one lower, if not for these college prep courses.
And I want to jump in and say that we're not necessarily ascribing malice to this, that this was done on purpose specifically to inflate ratings, just noting that these courses, which are not necessarily resulting in the outcomes that families, students, districts, the state want, we're looking at how that did have an impact on those ratings, also to help give context on when these courses are not going to count in future ratings, what that might mean for those schools.
Right. And again, on the surface, it sounds fine. It sounds like, oh, well, don't we want every student to take college prep courses? But we're talking about, can you explain what these courses are themselves?
Sure. So these are online, largely in some cases, self-paced courses. They're designed under state law for students who haven't met college readiness metrics through any other means. So students who haven't necessarily passed an AP test, passed an IB test, passed a dual credit class. They're sort of like the last, college readiness option for those students who aren't necessarily meeting those bars. The issue is that for many high schools, that's almost all of their students, or a huge majority of those students haven't met college readiness bars before they get to the 12th grade. And so many of them are taking these courses and not necessarily meeting other college readiness metrics.
And what are you hearing from students and teachers about these courses?
Yeah. So that was one really important part of this, was not just to kind of look at it at the state and school district level, but to talk to students. And maybe these courses are really helping them. Maybe they're feeling more prepared. So I talked to 20 students, former and current, across a lot of different campuses. And, some had virtually no opinion, but a lot of them said, they were told explicitly that this was for the accountability point, that they were taking this not necessarily to prepare them for college, but also to get that credit for their school. Others said they rushed through it in just a few hours, which, it's designed to take quite a bit more time than that. And still others were telling me they're in college now and they're still in remedial courses despite taking the classes in high school.
All right. So, Bianca, this then does raise some questions about Houston ISD's school accountability grades and what we've seen the last couple of years. I recall the state-appointed superintendent Mike Miles touting the idea a year before last that, our accountability grades, there were no failing schools. But in fact, without the college prep courses that we're talking about, some of these campuses would have failed, right?
Well, it may change a lot of the context that we understand from the accountability rating systems. It adds to what we know about how the accountability ratings are decided and what these schools' ratings actually mean, right? It helps us kind of understand a little bit more about what success is looking like at the district. And largely since the state takeover, a lot of the schools have raised their accountability ratings, which many people will see as a positive move. It's one of the things they need to do to exit the takeover, exit those multi-year failing campuses. And last year, they celebrated no failing campuses. This year, there was a little bit of a slip. Morath, the Texas Education Commissioner, didn't seem too concerned by that. They're looking for those multi-year failing campuses. So it definitely adds to the context of the celebration that HISD is raising its accountability ratings. What does that actually mean for the success of your student or what your student has learned?
And then, Claire, this is the college prep courses. This is something schools can continue to use for the next, year or two?
Yeah, so for this next school year, it'll still count for the accountability ratings, but that'll be in 2028 because it lags by a year. So 2028 is the last time that you'll see any evidence of this in the accountability ratings.
Megan, what else goes into those state accountability ratings?
Sure. So they're largely fueled by beyond at high schools. It includes college readiness, and it also includes STAR scores. So how a school performs, largely 9th and 10th graders, on the STAR exams, English, math, science. And so that is going to fuel, the other half of the rating for high schools. And then for middle schools and elementary schools, STAR is effectively the entirety of the accountability ratings.
All right. So now this then takes us to another interesting wrinkle in all of this, Bianca, which is Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick weighed in on what should go into school accountability ratings. What would he like added to the mix?
Yeah, he's added, he made quite an announcement last week that he would push for legislation that would knock schools an accountability rating down a letter grade if they were found to have any of books that he described as lewd or vulgar in their libraries. And that would be a radical change to the accountability system. As Megan outlined, it's largely STAR performance scores and the college prep ready courses that kind of decides whether the school is on the right track or improving or not doing as well. If you added this layer to the accountability rating system, it would really dramatically change the consequences, which are already very high for the accountability rating system. The accountability ratings can lead to state takeovers. If a campus is found to fail 5 years in a row, that is a path for the state to take over not only the school, it's a single campus can trigger a takeover of the entire district. What Patrick is recommending or saying he's going to push for legislation, and we should be clear, it's an announcement to push for legislation. This would have to be formally adopted. We're not anywhere near there yet. But what he is, announcing is that he wants those schools to be taken down if they're found to have these books, which if you're taking some schools down from a D to an F a number of years in a row, that could create another path for the state to take over these districts for not just student achievement, but now we're looking at a perceived moral failing by the district. So it was a major announcement last week.
I imagine. So, you have to have some basis on which schools are evaluated. And there are plenty out there who are critical of the idea of leaving it all up to or primarily up to STAR test scores. On the other hand, if you're not using test scores, then it does introduce the possibility of from one couple year period to the next, whatever the individuals in power believe from a moral standpoint is appropriate education could be used as an evaluation instead.
The difficult point that we're in with education, and this was really ushered in on a large-scale basis after No Child Left Behind in the early 2000s. I spoke to Jack Schneider, who runs the Center for Education Policy at University of Massachusetts Amherst. And essentially when that era came in, more than 25 years ago, it created this standard of standardized testing that was pretty much like the only benchmark we could fathom to measure student success. And so it's so ubiquitous, it's so entrenched in our education system that it's not that we couldn't find other ways of measuring student success, it's that the system now relies so heavily on standardized testing that it's likely not to go anywhere. So there's lots of debates about whether standardized testing is really even a helpful measure. It doesn't purport to measure any of the things that a lot of people care about with education, about their growth, their socialization, any of that kind of stuff with students, but it is entrenched in our system. So yes, I think a lot of people have gotten to the point where how else would we measure success? How else would we tell if our kids are growing? And so we're a little bit stuck nationally in that kind of mindset that that's the only way to measure progress. And so if that's kind of attached to the accountability ratings, it offers, Jack Schneider says, it offers a real narrow view as to whether the child is growing or the student is growing or the student is actually having any kind of success or the campus is having success.
Claire, the lieutenant governor's idea aside, getting back to the way school accountability ratings are determined now, and seeing this phase out of the college prep courses having an influence on that, are there particular schools or districts that may be at risk of finding that they're going to repeatedly fail again and face a state takeover once that change goes into effect?
Yeah, so I mean, we're going to see quite a few changes to the accountability system too. So I'll be interested to see in how much, if any, the ratings fluctuate, because in a few years, the STAR test is being phased out as well. So that being paired with college prep, I think, we're seeing more state takeovers right now across the state. For HISD, I don't know how much it'll affect the ongoing state takeover because, as Bianca said, Mike Morath seems like the takeover could end pretty soon. But yeah, there are a few things at play right now that could affect the accountability system and school ratings.
Megan, this could lead to some really interesting timing for Houston ISD. You could see a circumstance where they leave state control just as changes go into effect for how they're evaluated, and suddenly those changes negatively impact them, and they could be back under state control.
I want to say HISD under Mike Miles has seen dramatically fewer D and F rated schools. To trigger a takeover, you need schools with 5 consecutive F ratings, or academically that's the criteria. HISD does not have that criteria, and so HISD, that would need to happen again for it to be taken over. We're a long ways away from that happening again. In our story, we looked at just theoretically what would be the impact without college prep courses. That's not what the rating actually is. It's just sort of theoretical what it would look like without college prep courses. So if a school was going to have those ratings, it would need 5 more years of ratings after the takeover ends. That would be a long time, and that's a long ways away. I also wanted to add that the state is going to dramatically change how it counts college career and military readiness in future accountability ratings. They're going to essentially give tiers, or they're proposing giving tiers. So college prep courses would, count, a little bit. More rigorous metrics would count a little more. More rigorous metrics would count even more. And so schools would be rewarded. Right now, schools are given the same credit per a college prep course, for an AP course, for an associate's degree, which is 2 years of credit. This new way that they're changing CCMR is going to reward schools for giving students more rigorous college readiness metrics. Now that is going to change significantly how schools are being rated and earning these ratings, sort of giving schools that are achieving more credit and maybe taking away some credit from schools that have not been getting students to meet those higher metrics.
Bianca, accountability grades aside, what else does Houston ISD need to do to leave state control?
Yeah, there's 3 major things. The accountability ratings, no multi-year failing campuses, as well as improved board governance. And they need to have their special education department in compliance with state and federal laws. And this summer, that, I guess it's to be seen whether it took a step back or took a step forward. They did a major restructuring in May about how they're delivering special education services across the district. It was then put under federal investigation by the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education. And then the TEA launched its own investigation into that and found the district was possibly in violation for a couple of different provisions for the IDEA Act, a law that protects students with disabilities. When I spoke with Miles on the first day of school, he said, I asked him if he had been in consultation with TEA conservators, because the special education department had been under conservatorship for years predating the takeover, when they were designing the special education restructuring. And he said, yes, they work closely with them all the time, and that he felt they were going to be in compliance with what the TEA had requested of them. And he said, we're moving forward. We're still going on. He shared with me that it must be legal because they're still able to move forward with it, which I found very interesting.
Bianca Seward covers education for Houston Public Media. Claire Partain reports on it for the Houston Chronicle. Megan Menchaca is K-12 reporter now with the Texas Tribune. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And still to come, the Astros and their general manager have agreed to part ways. That news out just this morning. What led to the announcement and what happens next? We discuss with Believe in Astros co-host and Houston Press writer Jeff Balke as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
On the next Fresh Air, Lisa Kudrow. She's up for 2 Emmys for the final season of The Comeback, playing Valerie Cherish, an actress who will endure almost anything to keep working. We'll talk about saying goodbye to a character she's played over the span of 21 years and why she recently binged the series Friends for the first time. Join us.
It's like you're always stuck in second gear. When it hasn't
It's tonight at 8 here on News 88.7.
Support comes from Houston Theater Week, a citywide celebration of live performances. Participating organizations include theater, dance, and music presenters. Returning August 24th through the 30th. Tickets at HoustonTheaterWeek.com.
Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. With over 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
84 right now, high of around 100.
The Houston Astros and general manager Dana Brown have agreed to part ways. That news just this morning comes as the Stros are licking their wounds after a dramatic loss Sunday to the worst team in baseball. It's not the first time in actually a while that they have found themselves losing series to subpar ball clubs. Let's discuss now with Believe in Astros co-host and Houston Press writer Jeff Balke. Hi, Jeff.
Good morning, Craig.
Brown's contract was already up at the end of the season. Why are the Astros doing this now?
Well, he's been terrible since the team has been terrible since the break when there was a chance they got Dalton Varsho, and that's basically it. The trade deadline netted them very little. And, they've lost 5 straight series. And when you have, Dana Brown, one of the big problems the Astros have had this year, they haven't really had a terrible run of bad injuries. I mean, the Carlos Correa was a problem, but overall they've been fairly healthy, particularly with pitching.
So, especially compared to the last couple of seasons.
Exactly.
Prior, yeah.
And so but their pitching has been awful, particularly their starting rotation pitching. And when you look at it, every move that Dana Brown made to sort of bolster that has flopped. When you think of Tatsuya Amai and you think of Mike Burrows and you think of Ryan Weiss and on down the list. And then you have the other problem is that all of this sort of dice rolling that he's done with bit players, Nelson Velasquez, and there's a long list of players that in a few years we're all going to go, that guy played for the Astros. Yeah. There's a huge list of guys that have been in and out of this lineup, and they just have not been able to figure out how to make the team work, and that's a problem. And so I think with particularly this string of series losses, including the Angels, including the A's, including some really, really rough rough play lately. I just don't know what else the Astros' choice they really had.
This is a franchise that for more than a decade has bet pretty big and largely won those gambles on players. I mean, what I mean is they've taken big swings in trades, free agency, the things that a general manager tends to do. It does seem like the transactions for the last year or so, at least since Correa maybe, have been awfully minor in comparison.
Yeah, well, they don't have anything to trade for is part of the problem. I mean, Dana Brown, listen, I did not think when they hired Dana Brown that they were bringing him in to be a long-term foundational general manager like Jeff Lunau or somebody like that. He was a guy who had a track record of building farm systems, particularly with the Braves. He had done a good job of making good choices and good draft picks. And I think that's what the Astros really wanted him to do. But quite frankly, setting aside the first couple of years when they didn't have any first and second round draft picks, his drafts have been okay, not great. I mean, they only have 2 players in MLB's top 100 pipeline, and both of those guys were drafted this year. So when you look at those situations and you look at the fact, well, they don't really have anybody to be able to trade. The biggest move that's been made during his tenure is the Kyle Tucker deal, and that's been a huge success. But, Hayden Wisniewski missed the entire year last year. Cam Smith has been fantastic, and bringing in Isaac Paredes was a big deal. But that's one, and when you look at all of them, the totality of what has happened just doesn't add up to a winning ball club.
The Astros have 3 assistant general managers. They have Jeff Bagwell, who is serving as a senior advisor, and then, of course, Jim Crane, the owner, overseeing baseball operations for the time being. seems like a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Do we know who's in charge of what?
Yeah, so we do know that Dana Brown was fully in charge of the draft, or at least that's the assumption we make. But in terms of everything else, it's by committee. There's no question, and I think that might be part of the issue that we're seeing here. You mentioned Jeff Bagwell. We saw how bad the offseason was before Dana Brown came along, and it was Jeff Bagwell, and Reggie Jackson, and these guys making decisions about who they were going to sign. I think ultimately they need a dominant general manager. They need someone in the position that can come in and restructure how the Astros operate as a ball club. Jim Crane has made the comment over and over that the Astros window for winning a World Series is always open as long as he's the owner. I'm just not sure that's a realistic plan. And I think you're going to have somebody that comes in and has an honest conversation with this and says, listen, this team is in a weird place. We need to go out and fix that. And that might mean a little short-term pain for long-term gain.
There may not be a better example of being in a weird place and experiencing short-term pain than yesterday's game. The Astros were leading 6-0. Lost the game 7-6. This is to the Athletics, the worst team in baseball. This puts the Astros in a tie in first place in the American League West with the Texas Rangers. Oof.
Yeah,
rough.
Look, the AL West is historically awful, and I don't say that lightly because there have been some historically bad divisions. The AL West is set to become one of the first divisions ever where every team has a negative run differential, and by a significant amount. In addition to that, there's a decent chance the winner of this division is under 500 at the end of the season. I mean, we're talking about a race to the bottom. Seattle has been absolutely abysmal. The Rangers have basically been what the Astros have been. The Astros just have had a streak of bad luck before the Rangers had one. It's just a terrible, terrible, horrible division, which makes losing to the Angels and the A's and teams like that within that division even more painful when you're a team like the Astros.
It could make for a really fun or really frustrating final month of the season, or probably a little bit of both.
Probably both.
In the meantime, we always have the Texans to look forward to. So let's shift gears and talk about that for just a minute. We're a week away from cut day in the NFL, entering this final week of training camp. The Texans still have a couple of questions to answer, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I think, we've seen some shuffling along the offensive line just a little bit here and there. They obviously have lost Higgins, their young wide receiver, for the season. So they're likely going to be looking for another wide receiver. They have a few things out there. I think offensively is where we're gonna see the biggest changes. Like the tight end position is really interesting because you've got this kid they drafted who hasn't played football for that long out of Germany, who's just made play after play. And then, of course, you have Dalton Schultz. They're gonna have guys who I think we're going to see some surprises of players that make the roster towards the bottom of the roster. I think a big part of it is going to be how these guys play special teams. I think that's going to be a big part of a lot of these final decisions.
They seem to have good tight end depth. They have a lot of choices at wide receiver, but I'm not sure any of them are number two wideouts. And they seem to have found their way to a front five that they're pretty happy with, but it's not necessarily who they had initially intended.
No, that's right. And I think with the interesting thing about they have a good running back room too, I think.
Well, they have a couple of good running backs.
Solid.
And then they've got injury problems behind them.
Yeah, they do. But I think the interesting thing really, which really everybody should be looking at, is what is Tank Dell's status game one? Is he on the short-term injured reserve? Is he on the roster but not playing the first game? That's going to tell a lot about what's going to happen in terms of the receiver room. If they think Tank Dell is going to come back and game one is going to be available and ready to play at full strength, then it really helps them a little bit to sort of make a little better decisions. Of course, Jalen Noel is going to play a big role in this too.
Jeff Balke writes for the Houston Press and co-hosts the Believe in Astros podcast. Jeff, thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig.
And that will do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, and Mincho Jacob. Jared Carroll's our technical director. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us tomorrow for more Houston Matters.
I'm Michael Schaefer. My partner Ellen and I have been proud supporters of public radio